Greetings everyone, I'm Bruce Thunderspark. Today I'm going to be talking about how I would fix Mean 6. Now this is one of the episodes that I actually have a pretty darn good idea for. It's one of those that's going to need a complete episodic remake, or essentially changing almost everything about it. Of course, I think keeping Chrysalis as the antagonist for this would be a pretty good idea if they can handle her a little bit better. Like, she's going crazy makes a lot of sense with all this, and I think that Twilight does a pretty darn good job. Just like the real Twilight, she's well-mannered, not well-mannered, but she has a good brain. But unlike Twilight, she's, obviously evil. So these should be the Mean 6 rather than the opposite 6. I'm trying to think of a way to have each of the main 6 have their defining personality traits, but twisted to be, evil. Now, I'm going to start with Applejack, because I think this could work pretty well. Rather than just being the blatant liar that we already saw in the Discord and Harmony, she could still be honest, but rather than lying, she does omissions of truths, so she technically still is being honest, but she just isn't saying much. So she essentially just stays in the background, not saying much and observing, meaning that obviously she's still a workaholic, that she collects all the information she is. She's essentially just a spy that no one notices. Now, for Rarity, thinking of modifications for these, because they all have generally positive personality traits, but keeping with generosity, that rather than being, generous in a good way, generous in a bad way. Now, how do you do that? How do you be generous in a bad way? Well, it's giving things that people either don't need, simply because, out of malice, obviously, because they're the Mean 6. So she essentially gives she gives them, bad prank things. Not, Piggy Pie pranks, but bad things, like maybe something that hurts them, is specifically, for Applejack, would be something related to her parents, in a mean-spirited way. Which I think would be a really good way, I'm giving you this gift, but it's actually just something bad. Now, for Pinkie Pie, what would we do with her? Well, she could steal the element of laughter, but we could make it a more Jigsaw type thing. Now, obviously not like Jigsaw, because this is a kid's show, but what if we had it that she did pranks that could end up having their friends hurt or in peril? Like something hanging them over a cliff and they have to confess to something or whatever, kind of like Jigsaw. People could point to that as a point of reference for this. Now, for Rainbow Dash, loyalty could still be present, but it could be similar to what happened with Nightmare Moon, where she becomes a soldier. Or maybe, again, she's good at hiding what she actually is, kind of like the Applejack in this version. And that she essentially is the bully characters we see, originally with Fluttershy. She's a bully, but she's still confident and sure, rather than just being a lazy bum, because that doesn't make any sense. Now, the most difficult one I could think of was Fluttershy, because how do you make Fluttershy the character whose kindness into something that's mean? Well, this was, of course, honestly the most difficult one for me to think of. How could you combine kindness and meanness, because they're generally opposites? Well, I think that rather than that, she instead uses the woodland creatures to her advantage, in that she uses it to maybe Poison Ivy, I believe, where she's against environment, people building stuff using materials, an extreme environmentalist, essentially. And she eventually uses this against Mean 6, she talks so nice to animals and has them attack their characters, which obviously doesn't do much. She could maybe bring in Timberwolf that the other Mean 6 have to defeat. And I think, unlike where they just go through it and don't know, it makes a lot more sense for the Mean 6 to actually be like this, because then they would still seem like the Mean 6 at first glance, rather than being total opposites. Everyone knows Rainbow Dash isn't lazy. Everyone knows Fluttershy's still nice. If you do it like that, where they are still their different traits. I mean, honestly, they should be the evil versions, not opposite. And Twilight isn't an opposite. She is an evil version of Twilight, which is what the rest of the insects should have been, rather than just a hoarder or basic liar. Which obviously the main six should have really figured out. They could have thought they were like, oh, it's changing that it went with Chrysalis, or maybe Chrysalis herself. They really should have realized that. And here's the interesting part: they will realize it, but they'll think it's just them on a bad day. They'll call out the mean six on their crap, and eventually it'll spearhead to a point where the main six and the mean six have to fight. But unlike where they have to fight, essentially when they get to before they get to the tree and they fight. And the interesting thing is, the mean six are going to win the fight, rather than it just being a basic episode and like some shenanigans. With Chrysalis' help, the mean six, because we can clearly see that Twilight is that evil Twilight is capable of being her, so it's likely that they have the same abilities. And as such, mean Twilight helps them defeat them, and they capture them and using their basic abilities like building or fashion or whatever, and essentially a trap because they are them. They have the same advantages and similar disadvantages, but they're twisted for evil purposes. And they do this so the main six can't escape. But what happens is the same thing with the tree. They have the same traits, and as such, they should be accepted by the tree. But this is what shows the tree is actually smart. When they go to get the elements, each of them shows the evil aspect of their personality. It doesn't have to show the evil aspect, but the tree can point it out. For example, it defeats them in specific ways other than melting. With Twilight, it essentially beats her scheming nature. How would they do that? How? It essentially beats them using the negative parts of their personality. With Fluttershy, it turns the animals on them, makes them realize what they're doing. With Applejack, it calls out everything that she simply didn't say. With Rarity, it rejects her gifts because a bad gift or one that's made with ill intent isn't a gift at all. With Pinkie, it tells her that she doesn't need to do all these evil trap things, and that the point of laughter is to make others laugh, not to make yourself laugh, or to make people forced to laugh. Oh yeah, that could actually be a good thing for Pinkie Pie. With Rainbow, it shows that the point of loyalty is to be loyal to your friends, not loyal to a commander or a leader, because she's obviously going to be loyal to Chrysalis above all else, and she simply doesn't see when she's doing bad, she just goes along with it. It could show the disadvantage of the certain aspects, of course. Twilight, her scheming mind and powerful magic, is put to a dark use. And she again tries to upset Chrysalis, and she manages to win. The tree sees this, and sees that she's going to destroy her, or defeat him, or whatever, like fully. And the tree knows that Twilight would never do this. She would try to reason with them. She would at least let them go rather than completely destroying them, which is obviously kind of what happened to Storm King, but Tempest did that, so that's different. So once all this is done and like all of them are defeated, like what happens with the main six? Well, once Chrysalis is defeated by them, the tree doesn't destroy them yet. Rather than it lets them have the elements, and Chrysalis runs off. And eventually she finds the main six and uses her own abilities, like her own changeling abilities, to free them. Now this could be a possible point at her redemption, but she is essentially still using the main six. She tells them about the elements and whatnot, and once they go into combat, the mean six try to use the elements on the main six as well as Chrysalis. But instead of you being effective, they rebound back onto them because they were using them for ill purposes. And then the tree can do its big defeating thing. And shows that both the elements and the tree are linked to the main six for what they do for good, rather than just having their stuff. Because you could be a master of magical arts and still be completely evil. That is what the episode should show, that it is your choices and what you do with your gifts, rather than simply having gifts. like, oh, you have a bunch of loyalty and skills. Well, you can still put that loyalty to bad use. Same with laughter, same with generosity, same with honesty. Or maybe Applejack could be that she is way too honest, that she has bluntness to her essentially, which is a problem with her character. But rather than she being able to fix it, she instead does it to hurt others. Like, she's completely honest about things. She doesn't like keeping secrets that could hurt others. She just says it all, for malice and evil purposes. So it shows that it's not the gifts that you have; it's how you use them, rather than just being that, oh, these characters are opposites of the main six and they're evil and whatnot. A lot of people were disappointed by this episode, and if you take it as it is, it's honestly just discordant harmony, but the main six are being stupid and whatnot. It does give a good advantage of showing what the tree can do, but having the tree play a more prominent role rather than just destroying them when they try to take the elements, having them take the elements themselves rejecting that, because the main six already have the magic of friendship on their side. I think this would be a really good way to end it off. It would also be a really good way for Chrysalis. And what would she do? Well, she would have escaped in the kerfuffle after the main six brought the elements back. So, what then? What would happen then? Well, she would obviously escape, but this episode compared to the other one, we would get to see more of what Chrysalis can do. The fact that she has somewhat of a decent side to her, that she knows that the mean six could destroy Equestria or whatever, and she does it because obviously she doesn't want any things against her, and she uses the main six to defeat them, but also because she's getting in over her head and she's doing all these crazy things to just try to defeat them, when it completely backfires on her with the evil Twilight. Now, why would the evil Rainbow Dash betray her with loyalty? Well, again, she has the loyalty to her friends. But the thing is, loyalty can be given or taken pretty easily. So rather than being loyal to it, she ends up being loyal to the highest source of power. Whoever's in control, she is loyal to. Which again shows how that can be used for bad. This was actually one of my favorite reworks. Well, I've only made a few, but it's actually one of my favorite ideas because it could show the actual side of the main six, like maybe an alternate universe thing. They could bring that up at some point. I'm Prince Thunderspark, and this was my personal take on how you can make the main six a pretty darn good episode.